Hi guys, welcome to our first video of our two videos that are regarding writing linear equations. Now there are two forms of linear equations that are useful when using information to write an equation. They are slope-intercept form and point-slope form. And both forms include the parameter m for slope. So you can see both of those right here in this table. And we see that we have m here in our slope-intercept form and here in our point-slope form. We are first going to talk about slope-intercept form in this video. So our learning target for this video is I can write the slope-intercept form y equals mx plus b of a linear equation given different information. The two attributes that need to be found to complete the slope-intercept form of a linear equation are the slope and the y-intercept. Hence the name slope-intercept form. Okay, so how can we find those two things if they are not given to us? There's a formula for slope, which we use the letter m, as we talked about earlier, to represent. And if we are given 2 points, which we will label as x1, y1, and x2, y2 on a line, the slope is the change in y over the change in x. Now that's what this little thing right here means. That little triangle is actually the Greek letter delta. Okay, so it's like delta y over delta x. That's messy. And that means change in. Okay, and so to find the change in those two things, we subtract. We're finding the difference. And what we do is in the numerator, since it's change in y, we're going to take y sub 2 and subtract y sub 1. And then denominator, we are going to take x sub 2 and subtract x sub 1. Now, this should be familiar. Then, if we are not given the y-intercept, our b value in the equation, we can find it a couple different ways. We can either substitute 0 in for x and solve for y, which we'll be doing sometimes. But more specifically with this type of equation, we'll probably be substituting the slope and a point on the line into the equation and solve for b. Excuse me, I have a typo there. We'll fix that. Okay, now let's get going. Write an equation in slope-intercept form given the information about each line. Remember, slope-intercept form is y equals, and we need to know the slope and the y-intercept to fill us in. So we need to fill in m, and then we also need to fill in b. Okay, so our slope is m, our y-intercept is b. Okay, in example A, it says m equals 3, b equals 4. So we are actually given everything we need to know, and we can simply write y equals 3x minus 4. b is negative 4. I think I might have said just 4. And we're done. We will save example B for class. So moving on to example C, it says m equals 4 and containing the point 3, negative 2. So what it has given us here is the slope and a point on the line. Whenever we are given a point on the line, we are actually given an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate, which is helpful to find b, as we learned up in the box above. So obviously m is our slope, and we know that 3, negative 2 gives us an x and a y. So what we can do is substitute those values into our slope-intercept form and solve for b. So my y value is negative 2, my slope is 4, my x value is 3, and then I still have plus b at the end. So I can multiply 4 times 3, and I get 12. And solving for b, I'm going to have to subtract 12. Negative 2 minus 12 is a negative 14. So I have found my b value. So now I do know my m and I know my b, and I can write my slope-intercept form y equals 4x minus 14. Okay, our last example is going to be example E. And what it gives us here is that the line is passing through the points negative 3, 6, and 5, 2. So it's giving us 2 points. We don't know the slope or the y-intercept. So we have to use first the slope formula that we learned above. And what we're going to do, since we need our 2 points, I'm going to label this first one x1, y1 for first point, and x2, y2, my second point. So for slope, I'm just going to put a little star here. We first need to find slope. Remember, it's y2 minus y1 in our numerator. So y2 is 2 minus y1 is 6 over x2 minus x1. So x2 is 5 minus x1 is negative 3. So my numerator is just 2 minus 6. That gives me a negative 4. Remember, when we are subtracting a negative as we are in our denominator, that becomes addition. So I'm actually going to be taking 5 plus 3, and that is going to give me 8. Now with the slope, we always want it in a fraction, unless if it can be simplified, or simplify the fraction as well. And this one we can simplify. Negative 4/8 is a negative 1/2. And I just like to put the negative sign out front of it. Okay, so we found our slope. Now we have our slope and we have a couple points. So similar to example C, when we had the slope in one point, we can just pick a point and plug that in for the x and y, and then use our slope, plug that in for m, and we can solve for b. So we have y equals mx plus b. So whatever point floats your boat, doesn't matter. I'm just going to pick the first one, where my y value is 6. I found my slope to be a negative 1/2. My x value is negative 3, and then I have plus b. So the first thing I'm going to do is multiply my slope and my x. To multiply a fraction, you just multiply straight across. Now notice I'm taking a negative 1/2 times a negative 3 over 1. That is going to give me a positive 3 over 2. I'm going to keep that as a fraction because we can never get too good at adding and subtracting fractions. I need to subtract 3/2. Well, if I want to subtract 3/2 from 6, 6 needs to be written with a common denominator. So how many halves is 6 wholes? Well, that would be 12 halves. And I have to subtract 3/2 from that. So when I'm subtracting fractions, I just take the numerators and I say, hey, what's 12 minus 3? And that's 9. So my b value is going to be 9/2, which is equivalent to 4.5 if you did it like that. But we are going to write our equation, y equals my slope, negative 1/2 times x, and then plus, I'm just going to write 9/2 from my b. You could put 4.5 if you like. Okay, we're going to do the other 3 examples tomorrow. Now you need to watch the next video, which is point slope form.